What creates a good civilization? Are some born stronger than others, or are they built as a product of the hostile world around them? For the past 4 years, I've attempted to answer these questions and many others by simulating and carefully documenting the natural rise and fall of a civilization in Minecraft. One from humble beginnings that grew into a superpower that would change the history of this server forever. The goal of an empire of humanity is to leave a mark on the world. It's just instinct. But how can one ensure that their contribution actually echoes throughout all the ages? How can you build a nation worthy of standing the test of time and avoid fading into obscurity like many before you? This, my friends, is perhaps the greatest social experiment in Minecraft history. The story of Minecraft's greatest civilization, the rise of my nation, the Huitca Federation. And now, from its humble beginnings, our story begins. On the continent of Neden lived a rather obscure nomadic tribe of people known as the Tlacat, led by their chief, or Tlatoani, simply known in legend as the Founder. The Tlacat initially had free reign of the lower plains of Neden. They soon found their territory shrinking at the hands of various empires that began to expand into the region. Thus, guided by the Founder and by the gods, they made the difficult decision to venture westward in search of safer lands. After months of traveling, the Founder led his people to a small city-state on the continent of Vastalos, known as Neosnosis. Here, blown away by the beauty of the Gnosan civilization, the Tlacat made the unanimous decision to abandon their nomadic lifestyle and to build numerous cities dedicated to their gods in the new land that they would discover. The Founder led their people to an unappealing, muddy island in the middle of the Phagosian Sea, with one sunflower atop the largest hill. The Founder was absolutely determined that this is the place that the gods had decided for them to build their city. However, a quarter of the Tlacat disagreed and began to set off on their own, venturing north to find a new place for their city. For those that stayed with the Founder, sandstone imported from the nearby mainland would be placed, laying the foundation for the almighty and eternal city of Tlahath, or Tlahath. As for those who pushed past the muddy islands, however, they would soon find themselves settling among the dune elves of the neighboring continent of Umarnu, creating a new people group who began to call themselves the Hiradi, meaning the United Peoples in this new Creole tongue. The Hiradi grew a rich and prosperous civilization with dozens of cities based off the sale of sandstone to their cousins in Tlahatl, and also through a series of diplomatic unions to the various pharaohs in the neighboring empire of Ashura. Eventually, though, after a deadly sandstorm destroyed the Hiradi capital, Braddock Blight, the civilization fell into disarray and dissolved into numerous small nomadic tribes once more. This marked a shift in power within the Tlacat world. And fast forward a couple of hundred years, this is where I come in, and I'm ready to cause some trouble. This is me, Rex Ferdinand, Prince of the Empire of Kartek on the fragile continent of Sparwood. At the time, smushed between two world superpowers, Kartek enjoyed the status of a buffer state, sort of just existing and earning a ton of money from trade and commerce. But in October of 2020, the Empire of Asharia wished to expand their sphere of influence into the region and began to invade and seize Kartek's mineral-rich western territories. Our small army could never withstand the might of Asharia, so instead, the King of Kartek opted to go the route of diplomatic sabotage. Various members of the royal family were dispatched to nations throughout the world, attempting to destroy Asharia's image internationally. Part of this group was me. Against my will, I was dispatched to one of the most important places as part of this mission, a new ally of Kartek and a small city-state that existed next door to the newly founded Asharian colony of Fahrenheit, a place known as the Alta Petal of Tlahatl. It's safe to say that my mood changed the second I stepped foot off that boat. The architectural prowess of the Tlahatlites had outmatched that of anything in Kartek, and their rich culture, history, and customs absolutely blew me away. After a private audience with the Tlatoani, Miklos, descendant to the founder, and the Kiwakowath, or Prime Minister, Huancoyo, who told me about their struggles against the imperialist forces on their native land, I was determined to help. I quickly got to work, and aided the Tlahatlites in the annexation of numerous Asharian forts on the island of Akotla, as well as building a makeshift border wall with the colony. Lo and behold, this pissed off the local governor, who decided to dispute a huge chunk of Tlahatlite territory. The two nations were on the brink of war. The pressing matters out east, being the war with Kartek, caused the Asharians to back down. In winning this dispute, the Tlahatlites annexed a huge portion of the neighboring island, and decided to change their name to reflect the new and diverse status of their country with all the people groups that they had just admitted. And the name that they chose was Huitca. The Huitca Federation, actually, coming from the same origins of the word Herari, meaning the United Peoples. While I had helped save the city-state from annihilation, my home in Kartek was now ravaged by war, and thus I chose to abandon Kartek and opted to stay here in Huitca as a citizen. Yeah, sorry, whatever. Well, this was great at first. Just as I was settling in, the Tlatoani decided to adopt a new constitution to change the system of governance in the nation over to that of a constitutional monarch. I was absolutely fuming. Part of the reason I decided to settle here was because the political structure in Huitca was similar to that of back home. And as well as this, I ultimately just disagreed with the effectiveness of democracy. I mean, look at the real world, am I right, guys?
Bruh.
And so, just a few months after I settled in, I decided to gather a small group of supporters and opted to rebel against the Tlatoani. On December 11th of 2020, while Tlatoani Niklos was taking a short vacation, I launched an insurrection against the Huitcan crown, seizing the temple in the center of the city and proclaiming myself the eternal Tlatoani of the newly reformed Huitca Imperium. Many fought back against my regime, and the alliance which Huitca was a part of, known as the VAWR, chose to back Niklos rather than myself. After word of an invasion arose, my supporters and I fled the capital city to a land up north, known as Snidea, where I conquered it and established a new capital city for Huitca, known as Chichiltec. I tried to retake Tlajadal one more time on the 12th of December, only for Niklos to challenge me for a 1v1 duel live on the radio. I accepted it, and after a long and grueling 27-second long fight, the Tlatoani came out on top, reforming the Huitca Federation once and for all. I'm just bad at PvP, listen, I'm sorry. After my failed coup d'etat, the new constitution was soon ratified, and democratic reforms were underway. But on the plus side, Snidea, which had declared independence from my failed imperium, was quickly reconquered and reintegrated back into the Federation as a state. Things started to turn around for Huitca, it seemed. And things only started to turn around for me. After some time in exile on a raft in the Sea of Culet, I was pardoned and welcomed back into the Federation, with the exception that I wouldn't cause any more trouble. While I accepted the terms of the Kiwakawat and the Tlatoani, I of course had other plans with the Federation. If I couldn't work against the Huitca system, I realized I would have to work within it. And that, my friends, was through politics and colonization. In late December, when the new constitution was implemented, I decided to throw my hat into the ring of Huitca politics. Through fierce campaigning, using some of the same tactics I used to seize the country in the weeks earlier, I successfully made it onto the ballot and won the bid for Huitca's chief diplomat under the first truly elected Kiwakawa, Zalorm, who, funny enough, was a friend of mine that I met in Snidea when I established Chichiltec. This term was largely uneventful, aside from a few incidents, and the nation almost splitting in half over the issue of the First Rafnir World War, where in the nation of Yumuldal we battled some sort of weird possessed goddess of the void or something. But in the end, it was fantastic for me to get my foot in the door of Huitca's systems and to show the current aristocracy that I had power in my own right. Oh, what's this? A useless and sparsely inhabited territory of Huitca? Yeah, that's right. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the continent of Umarnu, which I mentioned earlier, and Huitca owns the northernmost tip of it. Many people across Huitca and across the world saw the continent as largely a waste of space. However, I saw it as an opportunity. On January 18th, 2021, I sailed from Tlajadal to the northernmost tip of the mainland, setting up the city of Culet, which I planned to be my base of operations for the great and noble conquest of the vast Umarnu deserts. However, after discovering some weird ruins from the Hadadi people on the other side of the mountain next to the city, I tore down what I had built and moved the settlement so that I could better study these people and their culture. It was here that I opted to give the town a fresh name, the name of the old Hadadi town that used to once exist here, Farafin, meaning the town by the sea, and it was from this seemingly useless frontier town that Huitca history would change forever. I began to build up my town to attract new citizens to solidify my claim of Huitca's frontier. But within just a few days, a strong movement within Tlajadal was building. This group, which I'll call the expansionist opposition, led by the former Prime Minister Juan Coyo, were afraid that Huitca was already claiming more territory than it could actually enforce its control over. And you know what? They had a good point. But I did not care.
You know what you should care about instead? Supporting the series. For a limited time only, I'll be selling this custom Tlajadal sticker alongside the super detailed Huitca map showcasing the Federation at the height of its power. Like, look at how cool that is. Anyways, where were we again? Oh, right, yeah, establishing my town, my great expansion, and the opposition against it. Anyways,
I was certain that if I could get a foothold over this land myself, I could dominate it. Tensions rose between me and this group so much that they decided to endorse a candidate for prime minister with the hopes of shutting me out of the nation if they won. So, you know what I did? The best thing possible. I rallied all the new settlers in my town and started a massive campaign across the nation, winning the election, beating out the expansionist opposition, and becoming the prime minister for myself. Now that I was at the top of Huitca's democratic system, nobody could stop me from achieving my dream of my personal and Huitca hegemony over the continent. And boy was I wrong. The second I got into office, against the will of the opposition, I created a crown corporation to finance further expansion, and I launched various expeditions into the interior of the mainland. Once I had enough intel on the conditions of the continent, I approached the Huitca Senate. Hey, can you guys allow me to expand the borders?
No, it's too dangerous.
There could be gold though.
No, it's a horrible idea.
Come on, just let the guy expand the territory.
yay!
With a little bit of a push from the Tlatoani, who in part agreed with my idea of dominance over the continent, I was allowed to expand the territory of Huitca to the southwest, down to this little area that I called the Cape of Duranakua. I sent a few new citizens to create a town further south in this new territory, but a serious problem quickly emerged. As foretold, the number of citizens in this frontier remained worryingly low compared to the rest of the Federation. Roxizon was already having major trouble staying afloat, seeing as they were an entire ocean away from the Huitca heartlands, and a road had not yet been built to connect the towns in the region. Safe to say that this city was starving. There was still an excessive amount of empty land I wanted to get my hands on, and I knew I had to act quick before I was ousted by my rivals. On February 2nd, I launched an insane immigration campaign to drive more settlers to the southern edge of Huitca's frontier, which means I published my first video about stoneworks. The immigration campaign was highly successful, prompting hundreds of people to flow into Huitca overnight. I knew I had to take advantage of this, and that meant one thing. One more time.
No, it's too much.
Please.
The people are gonna call us warmongers.
Juan just let the guy. Yay!
You gotta be kidding me.
And with that, the Federation tripled in its land size overnight. Upon the expansion into Huitca, as the land was named, Huitca entered into its era of the Wild West, or the Wild Southwest, really. This region became full of standard frontier towns with incredible architecture, like Chalon or Quagura. But bandits, robberies, and conflicts with the natives unfortunately became common due to the lack of police forces in this area. I knew I had to do something quick, so I used this expansionist opportunity to collaborate with the indigenous peoples of the land which Huitca was conquering, seeing their fair and unanimous approval for being annexed by the Federation. Some opted to join outright, like those in Brasha, Hemnik, or Edain, and some opted to join as client nations, like those in Toshlar or Shania, colony down at the neck of Amarna. Others began to integrate and take over old cities, like the Heradi, who began to dominate Fairfen and who began to see me as their leader. And you know what? I embraced that. And others decided not to join at all, such as this one tribe who immigrated to the region from Vastalos under my reign. And this tribe, little did we know, would be the cause of over 100 years worth of war that would last from now all the way until the collapse of the Federation. But let's not jump ahead, we'll get there. Regardless, life was turning around for those in the Huitca frontier. My term ended and my elected successor, Big John, took over operations in Tlajatl. All was well. That is, until the Emperor started getting sick. It appeared out of nowhere. One day that Tlatuani was fine, and the next day he was deathly ill, and I took it hard. I'd grown quite fond of Niklos over time, who actually ended up adopting me, and even defended my expansionist actions against Juan Coy. Yet after news of his sickness, I fell into a deep slump. I began to neglect my responsibilities to the Zokyo Excavation Company, and overall, I just started to fall apart, until a goddess appeared to me. Entropy was her name, and she told me about a mystic item known as lunar cheese, which could be used to heal Niklos. And all I had to do was blow up the moon to get it. Okay, look, I know it sounds stupid. I was naive, okay? I blindly followed her. I'm sorry. Okay, long story short, since I already have a whole trilogy on this, I built a rocket using an ore that I found on an island off the coast of Snidea. I launched the rocket, I blew up the moon, causing the rest of Huitca and the world to hate me even more. Entropy worship was banned in Huitca, leading to me and my followers and a tribe of people who recently moved into the region known as the Lusitanians to declare independence in my city of Fairfen. But this nation did not last long because a coalition was formed against me, and they proceeded to torch and invade both mine and the Lusitanians' town. It was then that I switched sides, and the coalition forces made me realize that lunar cheese didn't actually have any healing properties at all, and all blowing up the moon actually did was unleash Entropy's true power, leading for her and her ghouls to jump the gap into the overworld at a location just south of Fairfen in an attempt to destroy everyone. The world then came together at the Battle of Argu, culminating in the defeat of Entropy and her minion Jazon, pushing the Entropic forces back into the depths of the void, yet still destined to return one day to enact her wrath on us all. And what was Snidea doing during all this? Shalorm caused them to secede from the Huitca Federation via a loophole in the Constitution because they lost faith in the Huitca government to actually establish control of their own territory, as Juan Coyo predicted. Oh my gosh, that was a mouthful. That's why I have a 3-part video series on this, because summarizing it in a few paragraphs does not do it justice. Throughout the whole Entropic Wars, as it was coined by Huitca historians, an event, perhaps more important than the battles themselves, took place. An event that would foreshadow the downfall of the Federation as a whole. And what was this event? An election. The people could have elected a pro-entropy Kiwakoa and sued for peace with me and Entropa at the expense of isolating themselves from the world. Or they could have elected someone new to the political scene. Someone who was anti-entropy, someone who was so consumed by their own self-interest that it would lead to the Federation down a path it could not get itself out of. And of course, they elected Mr. Self-Interest, a man from Fort Athenia known as Sumo. It was he who banned entropy worship. It was he who started a war against me. And it was he who would shape Huitca's history so much to the point where the next era is actually named after him. Speaking of which, welcome to the age of Sumo MC! After the defeat of Entropan forces, not only was my breakaway state officially amalgamated back into the Huitca Federation, but also I had to stand trial in front of all the nations of the world at a world summit in Tlajatl, which was very awkward. Truth be told, I thought the whole thing was so stupid, so I just went up on stage, publicly proclaimed insanity, and all charges were dropped. Anyways, the point is, Huitca entered another period of reconstruction. The Lusitanians, however, still bitter at Sumo and the coalition for the razing of their town, refused to concede defeat. They refused to join the Huitca Federation and instead opted to rebel, declaring themselves the rightful successor to the state of Entropa. Sumo, of course, would not allow this, and he quickly summoned the military legion occupying Fairfen to seize control of the ruined village. You know what? Time for some audience participation. What do you think the Lusitanians did in response? A. Surrender to Sumo's forces. B. Appeal to Entropy for help. Or C. Stay in the town and fight. The answer is none of these. The Lusitanians chose to seize the ruins of the old Huitca military outpost on the island of Huitca and declare their independence there. While Sumo successfully neutralized the threat for now, the situation with the Lusitanians only fueled his lust for power and for control. Now hold up, back to the library. You're probably wondering, what's the difference between your expansionist policies and Sumo's, Rex? Well, for one, and this can be backed by contemporary Huitca historians, I did my best to collaborate with the native peoples of the lands I was expanding into, where Sumo dismissed their claims entirely. Like for instance, first he funded the collapse of the neighboring nation of Viridian by undermining its institutions, annexing the territory in its entirety, but not before gifting some of the land to surrounding nations. Secondly, using gunboat diplomacy, he sailed into the capital of our ally Valandia and pressured them to join Huitca as a state. And thirdly, once the expansionist opposition started to speak up about Sumo's antics, he painted them as heretics and exiled them to an island off the coast of Duriniku. Oh, thank God it's April 20th. It's election time and Sumo is ineligible to run for re-election. And look at that, a pacifist named Vic Devant was elected. If he does well, Sumo shouldn't come back, so things should simmer down for a little while. Immediately after coming into office, seeing the fragility of the new leader, the expansionist opposition that Sumo exiled started a revolt on the island of Ravens in an attempt to form their own empire and establish themselves as the true Huitca state. The prime minister, upon seeing this, makes a crucial decision in Huitca's history, plunging it into a 100 years war against its neighbors. He opts to invade the island to subdue the rebel forces. The Ravenites panicked and began to look for nations that could give them military support, and a few states stood out from all the rest. The Ignarians, the Lusitanians, and of course, the tribe that immigrated to Amarnu from Vastalos were now calling themselves the Kingdom of Councils. They themselves had started to get fed up with Huitca's antics, especially after Sumo annexed a close trading partner of Valandia, and worried that they too would be the next victim to the expansionist government in Tlajaro. Surprisingly, despite being heavily outnumbered, this unlikely coalition, now calling themselves Kato, beat the Huitca forces at the Battle of New Ulm, embarrassing the nation and even annexing some of the surrounding islands in the process. Humiliated, Vikit stepped down for the role of Kiwakawath and called an election. And you know who won? You know who won? Sumo! Sumo won. And it was during the second term where Sumo really had the chance to define himself. And define himself, he did. Sumo decided to continue the war against Kato forces at our doorstep, and within a week, to everyone's surprise, he actually succeeds. Sumo invades, dethrones the Ravenite leader, and reestablishes the nation as a puppet republic of the Federation ruled by his friend. With one enemy out of the picture, Sumo then turned to focus his attention towards the Kingdom of Councils. He marched Sun warriors to occupy KOC's mainland and began a siege on their capital at Palermo. But despite the constant barrage of arrows and TNT, KOC continued to stand strong against Huitca. After a month with no advancement, peace was eventually declared and a non-aggression pact was signed between the two nations. But this pact would not last forever, and the war would soon continue. Meanwhile, in the north of the Federation, in the state of Akotlan, another important event is occurring. This is Scythe Centauri, a new immigrant to the Huitca Federation, and he came to this land with great aspirations, one of which was to build a noble city. So, he got to work, and slowly this town grew and grew and grew to become a sizable settlement within the Federation. And what was the name of this town, you might ask? Port Royal. But as Scythe's village began to grow, so did his ambitions. Scythe started to look past that to the Federation, aiming to have his town become a hub for trading commerce from all over the Phagosian Sea as an independent state. Sumo was not too keen with this idea, and when Scythe wasn't looking, banned. Sumo got him banned from the server, and once again placed one of his friends in charge of the state. While Sumo would be rewarded for this by being named the heir to the Huitca throne by Niklos, this village would not forget what he had done to them and to their founder, and they would eventually come back to strike with a vengeance against him, taking over the entire continent and destroying Huitca in the process.